What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Ohio State Football Chat Sports' style. That's right, Ohio State Football with Scarlet and Great here on Chat Sports Network. I'm here with the man, the founder, Buckeyes' favorite Michigan fan, James Yoder, founder of Chat Sports. We are going to break down a show for you, a rivalry show. We're just going to call it the Rivalry Show. We're going to do this weekly up into the game, maybe a little after if the interest is there. We're going to talk about the breakdown, the makeup of this game. A lot of people, I think, are overlooking this game, and this is a lot of implications on both sides. Both programs have a lot of implications. Don't get it twisted. This is not just a big reset. So, some of the things James and I are going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the Buckeyes and the point spread. Can the Buckeyes cover that, let alone win? Can they cover? Michigan's notice of allegations, and the big thing we are going to discuss the strength of the Michigan football team is their defense. James and I are both going to give our takes on how Michigan should use their strength of their team to attack Ohio State's offense. I'll even give the enemy some information on how I would do it. James will talk about how he would do it. It should be a loaded show. Real quick, the Buckeyes are favored by 17.5, and I just want to hear from the audience. Do you think the Buckeyes will cover? Like if the Buckeyes cover, comment if you take Michigan and the points. Right now, it is 17.5, probably where I would have it. Michigan is favored, or excuse me, is giving up 17, getting 17.5. James, Vegas is really good at this stuff when you get it late in season. I feel like you can take advantage of them early in the season. Late in the season, they kind of got it dialed in. What do you think?
Well, they certainly haven't got it right with this rivalry lately, right? I mean, what was the spread in 2022? I mean, different team, different Michigan team, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But what was it, 9.5 or 10 or 8.5 at game time?
Yeah.
Michigan wins that one by 22, obviously 2021. I can't remember what the spread was last year. Michigan, I think, was favored, right? But was it more than like 1 or 2 or 3
Yeah,
points?
it was really tight, yeah.
Which was close, right? It was a 6-point game all in. Look, I mean, this is the most frustrating Michigan team I can probably remember in my entire lifetime, because you see the talent there, you know what they're capable of. You'd think that Sherrone Moore would learn by osmosis of being in the room with Jim Harbaugh of how to win games, how to stop teams from throwing all over him, how to not give up third and longs at maybe the highest rate we've ever seen. And the most frustrating thing about this team right now is Moore was the OC, Kirk Campbell was the quarterback's coach the last few years, and they knew what was in that damn room for quarterback, yet they made no effort, at least from the public perspective, of going after a quarterback in the damn transfer portal in the spring. It doesn't have to be in January or December when you don't know if JJ is coming back. You know what Harbaugh is. You don't go after anybody in the spring, and you were seeing Davis Warren and Jack Tuttle and Alex Orji in practice next to JJ McCarthy for at least the last 2 years, and they didn't make any move. And so I think it's coaching malpractice on their part, but, they've got a bye week and then Northwestern to get ready for this one.
To defend Sherrone Moore a little bit, you're right about the fact that they didn't go out and get somebody. That's weird. Jack Tuttle. But
he was in the roster last year.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't know if they thought there was another year of development that came with being in the program. So they do have to own rolling into the season with this quarterback room. But I've seen Jim Harbaugh underperform I don't know if you call it perform not so greatly with poor quarterbacks. It's like handcuffs that no one can get around. So some Michigan fans I see give like this exact roster with better coaching is a great team. And I'm like, look, you give Jim Harbaugh John O'Corn, he can only do what he can do, ground and pound all you want. You got to throw somewhat. You saw quarterback limitations in 2020 as well.
Let me throw this back at you for a second. If J.J. McCarthy had decided to come back for this year, I realistically think that even with Sherrone Moore, even with the exact same coaching staff, everything happened the same except J.J. decided I'm going to come back. I think at worst, you might think I'm crazy, that Michigan is a one-loss team right now. They either lose to probably Texas. That I'm not sure if Michigan would have won that game even with JJ, but I think they could beat Oregon. Oregon didn't play that well. I mean, Oregon played a hell of a lot better against Ohio State than they did against Michigan. Maybe it was just they didn't think they had to play that well. But knowing what we know about JJ over those 3 years, I just don't see them losing 2, 3 games, 4 games with JJ so far this year. So you could say that they're a quarterback away from upsetting Ohio State to get into the Big Ten title game. Perhaps you definitely would win that game against Illinois. I think you would definitely win. Who was the other loss I'm missing here? Oregon, Texas, Illinois, and I'm just missing somebody.
Washington.
Oh, yeah, Washington.
Washington.
That's a win right there with JJ. So even if you have 2 losses, okay, cool, then you might be an upset of Ohio State away from making the playoff at that point, 10-2. But so I think this team is still a quarterback away from being a top 15 caliber team, right on the cusp of playoff. And now, with what they brought back, this is not a top 40 team in college football.
So call me a hater. I was never that impressed with JJ McCarthy unless it was third down. Then I was always impressed. And I'm like, how are you just shoe shining people on first and second down and you complete third down? That a great third down completion percentage. I would not give you Oregon. I would give you Washington every day of the week, twice on Sunday. I don't think I'd give you Texas. Ohio State, you'd have to just play your best game. But it doesn't have to be J.J. McCarthy. I think Michigan isn't, you're looking at maybe going 7-5. You're
6-6.
6-6 maybe.
Yeah.
And I could say with a good-ish quarterback, just a good-ish quarterback, not a first-round draft pick, yeah, you're 9-3 by default, right? Hey, I'm going to hate all I want, but teams, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, you have wins built into the roster when you're at the top of the conference. You just do. Now, Michigan did get a brutal schedule. So 17.5 at this point, James, do you like them to cover that because it's a rivalry? And do you say maybe a little bit of 2014, Ohio State should have won by a lot more than they did? There's some other years in there. The Rich Rod go for 2. Or was that Brady Hoke? Sorry.
That was Hoke in 13.
Yeah. So, 2013.
Outside of that Rich Rod 2008 game, which I could look it up, I think it was like 42-10 or 42-7 or something like that.
Game, yeah.
Even Hoke in some of his bad teams in 14, I think after JT Barrett was hurt, it ended up being 42-28. In 2012, Michigan had a good team coming back, a top 10 team, but by the end of the year, Urban's first year, undefeated Ohio State, and you had Michigan, I think, already had 3 losses going into that game, ended up at 5, lost to Ohio State, lost the bowl game. So I think that was a South Carolina top.
I think that was the
game.
Yep.
And that game, Michigan went into halftime with the lead. Everybody remembers the Denard Robinson kind of off the right edge when he was playing running back when Devin Gardner, the worst quarterback in Michigan prior to this year. And Denard popped off 2 Ohio State players. Like, they just hit him at the right time. And they both somehow, hit off each other and went to the ground. He went for the touchdown. And that was a relatively close game. I think the score in 14 was 12 was 26-21. And
that was a close game.
13, you go for 2 with a bad Michigan team at that point. They ended up 7-6. And so even in the Hoke's worst years, it was still within 17 points. Now, Ryan Day has got a lot of probably built up frustration. He probably is not going to call the dogs off if Ohio State is able to move the ball at will, or if they get a few turnovers and they're up 28-3 at halftime. You might be looking at a 56-3 game or something like that. He wants to make that 2018, 2019 style of stamp on there. And he's been up against it for the last 4 years. Didn't get a chance to play in 2020, the last 3 losses. And I think he would probably try and make a statement almost to the point of, we don't just want to beat Michigan. We want to beat them so bad that it's going to hurt their offseason, where it's just going to be people throwing up their arms like they were coming out of that, maybe that 2019 season after the back-to-back 62, 56-point games. And so if Michigan doesn't come prepared to play this game and they start slow on offense and give up 3rd and longs like they've done at a very high rate this year, then it could definitely get away from it. I don't think Ryan Day is going to pull the, they might have Oregon in the Big Ten title game the next week, but I don't think he's going to call off the dogs until they've got 55, 56, 58 points, something like that is my opinion. Now, not saying that's happening, but, at this point, 17, as the way the season's gone, and I've watched every Ohio State game, I think, except for one, and obviously watched every Michigan game. It feels small. It feels like a small spread at this point, right? It does feel like Ohio State should be, based on what we know, 24 to 28 points.
What was your loss to Oregon? 21 points?
Yeah, it turned out to be 38-17, but Michigan had I'm trying to think the exact rotation. Michigan had the ball inside the 5-yard line, down a touchdown, down 14, and that was the Alex Orji on third down, got stuffed, and then ran the double reverse wide receiver pass back to Orji on 4th and goal from like the 4-yard line. And so then Oregon didn't just kneel the ball. They went down the field and scored a touchdown, 90-yard touchdown with like a minute left. So took from what was a 14-point game to a 21. Michigan executes. They cut it to 7 with 3 minutes left. So there's ways they could have played out and been closer.
Yeah, I would call Ohio State and Oregon comparable teams. Yeah. People say transitive property doesn't work and they throw it out, and I'm always like, well, it's not the end all be all, but it is a data point.
Yeah,
it is a data point, unless you have a weird Nebraska, Indiana outlier where, one team. I think India is better than Nebraska. I do not think they are 51 points better than Nebraska, right? So. 17 feels about right. I think Ohio State has more talent that they can certainly do 21, 24, 28. I like what you said about Ryan Day. However, he just does not have it in him to make Woody Hayes' mistake where he runs up the score, has his best team ever the next year, and gets upset by Michigan because he gave him so much motivation. Now, he will allow Chip, if they get up by a lot, this is what I think, he will allow Chip to call a full and open playbook. He will just do it with backups.
Sure, I can see that.
Now, and that's the way it's been going. And honestly, it's a lot more fan friendly than what the old Ryan Day way is. Get up, by the whole third quarter or fourth quarter if they're playing a lesser team is Ryan Day with backups and calling vanilla. And I'm like, geez, man, why don't you just say you hate to play football? Give us something to watch.
Except never really backup quarterback, which has always been confusing to me is why they never let McCord take any snaps in 21 and 22. Why I never let really anybody take snaps outside of Fields in 19 and 20. I always like, you put
burnt McCord's red shirt. That really, that people don't understand him leaving a lot. And I'm like, guys, if you had what happened to him in that quarterback room coaching wise, and you had no red shirt and no eligibility, if that's my kid, you probably do the same. Like, hey, we can't risk this. So, I think the spread is probably right on. If anything, I'd say the Buckeyes win by 16. I like Michigan to cover just because of. I think Ohio State's got 24 points more talent on the field. They just shoot themselves in the foot a little bit. They get just a little bit of cheap gas in the engine sometimes, and you've seen it all this season. Now, James, if we're going to scheme up, Michigan's strength of their team is obviously the defense, right? If we're going to scheme up how we would beat the Buckeyes, we're putting our heads together. If you got Sherrone, I don't know if Sherrone Moore still listens to you and still heeds your every word. If he still takes offensive critiques from you, but at this time on the defensive side of the ball. All right. How would you attack Ohio State's offense with the strength of Michigan's team so that you can slow this game down enough so that you have a shot?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that is really interesting about Michigan's defense this year is that they've played pretty well in really long stretches. You take out the Texas game in totality. There's been some real wow, this team's got it together. But you always feel like you're on the cusp of disaster. I don't know why that is. It's because they give up those 3rd and 11s and 3rd and 8s just at such a high rate that you've become immune to it as a Michigan fan over the last 3 years, because this did not do that over the last 3 years in this run. How Connor Stallions knew the plays, whatever it is, they just didn't do it. And so you look back last week against Indiana, they played a pretty damn good game. You look against Oregon, I think up until that last touchdown with a minute left, they had held Oregon to 3 points in the second half. And outside of Texas, it was a pretty good defensive performance. But what I would say is you've got to almost not be the Michigan that you've been this year and try and go back to the defense. So what of the last 3? So what they're doing at a very high rate lately is blitzing the fifth and the sixth guy and then leaving guys in man coverage. Reminds me a lot of Don. It's not like the base defense, but it reminds me a lot of Don Brown in 2018 and 2019. And so if they run that where they're trying to get to Will Howard by bringing a fifth guy, bringing a sixth guy, then playing a man coverage or maybe even like a too high safety or something like that with man on the wide receivers, then you're going to get the streaking Emeka Ibuka, across the middle or whoever else it is, 6-7 yards in front of the line of scrimmage, get that ball, run across, and then just take up the sideline like we saw in the 2018 game over and over and over and over. So unless they've got a different formula, I think Ohio State's going to be able to play at will and pass at will and get big gains at will because of how this defense has changed under Wink Martindale. So if I was defense coordinator, I would just honestly, I know it's a new offensive system a little bit, but you can't teach an old dog new tricks in some regards. So stick to what's gone well for the last 3 years is find a way to get pressure with the front four and play zone, bend but don't break in the 20s. You look at CJ Stroud stats, you look at McCord or Kyle McCord a little less, but Stroud 35 of 49 for like 380, et cetera, et cetera.
Russell Westbrook type stuff. Big numbers in a loss.
They let it go. They let we're gonna let burn clock off, et cetera. Make them go on a 5 and 6 minute drive, 7 minute drive, get inside the 20. They can't go deep over our heads, so we can bracket the both sides of the field, et cetera, get pressure on them, make pass a little bit sooner than they want. And Ohio State struggled, they scored points, but they struggled to score touchdowns at a high rate and couldn't really do it. They weren't getting those outside of that Marvin Harrison pass in 22. They weren't scoring 40 and 50 and 60-yard touchdowns. It's because Michigan was like, we're going to let them drop down for 4 or 5 yards, 6 yards, 8 yards. In between this here, we're not going to give up that 1 minute offense touchdown. And that's not what they're doing this year, really at all. So I would try and say, hey, Mason Graham, first round pick. Kenneth Grant, probably first round pick. The defensive ends, right? Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart. Josiah Stewart's I've seen in mock drafts going in the first, maybe mid-second round. You've got potentially 3 first-round defensive linemen. Get some damn pressure like Ojabo and Hutchinson did in 2021 and bend but don't break, lock down the 20s. Give them as many yards they want, but look up at the scoreboard at the end of the first half, and it's 16-14 or something like that. They've got 4 drives. They went down, but 3 field goals. They got that 1 touchdown on us, and then it's a ball game, and hopefully Michigan can find a running attack in the second half like they did, for the most part of the last 3 years. I don't know if that's going to happen, though.
That's pretty solid, actually. It's pretty solid game plan. And to answer your question, why Michigan's defense looks really good, and then the dam breaks, I would just say fatigue. When the offense is punting it right back and putting them right back on the field, 100%. Right? Yeah, like it's just it's certainly not the Michigan defense of the last 2 years, I don't think, but it's a good defense. Like it's a good defense, and if it was rested, it would be even better. So if I'm an enemy,
their talent wasted is by what you just said there. It's like if how many times the offense just puts them back on the field in 2 minutes or in bad field position because of turnovers.
Yeah. And so if I'm going to be like, give the enemy some fuel here and say, if I were going to attack Ohio State's offense, right? Obviously I've watched all the games. I've watched some of Michigan's games. I'm, as big of a Buckeye fan as there is. I'm not a football coach, but I think I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. This is what I would do to if I'm a Michigan coach, slow Ohio State's offense down. For everything starts and ends with Mason Graham. Mason Graham. Ohio State does not have one offensive lineman that is in Mason Graham's stratosphere. Not one. That's the fact of the matter. It just is. I would probably slide him and get him onto the left side of Ohio State's offensive line. They have a lot of problems there. I think Donovan Jackson has not been an up-to-snuff guard. Now he's kicked out the tackle because of the injury. It's even more difficult position to play. I'm pretty sure he was the one that got tossed. Donovan Jackson was the one that got tossed that lost the game last year when McCord was throwing into a sack when he had Harrison open, and a lot of Buckeye fans, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well,
Harrison made a business decision. I'm not sure if you guys have seen the angles. He could have went after that pass. He short-armed it. He didn't want to take the hit from Rob Moore. I'm just saying, business decision.
He did that a lot. Well, last year, he was the best he was the worst Biletnikoff winner I think I'd ever seen in the fact that he was so good and drop a dozen passes. It double-digit drops. but then he would just absolutely beat the brakes off of everybody. He was so Jekyll and Hyde. Buckeye fans would blame it on McCord. I'm like, well, if it hits you in both hands, hit you in the face mask, I don't know what you want to do. He's getting sacked. Anyway, Donovan Jackson sucked on that play. He got like immediate sack, right? To win the game. That was the drive to win the game. Ohio State was driving. McGill McCord, fourth quarter magic going. So Donovan Jackson, I would attack him. I know Mason Graham would be on the inside. I do whatever I can to overload that left side of the line. Left side of the line now, it's got Carson Hinsman back, who was a starting center last year, and now he's just now getting back in. He looks like a good player, but again, he's been nagging injury. I would overload that left side of the line. Josh Fryer is probably, or Seth McLaughlin is in your center, and Josh Fryer, your right tackle.
Mr. Snap, we call him. He's Mr. Snap.
Those are your best two offensive linemen. So I overload that left side. I let Mason. I just tell Mason, look, how many snaps you want to play, dude? How many snaps you want to play? You want to play all of them? You can play all of them. You get hurt, well, Bud Kilmer, you shoot you up with the cortisone with the steroids, put you right back in. And the other thing, Will Howard. Will Howard's not like, I love Will. He's playing solid. He's fine. He's not this drop back, read the field. Can I get over that? A lot of times Jeremiah Smith has a man toast. Will doesn't even look. That's not his game, is to just drop back and pass and throw a deep ball. Will's job is to just take whatever Chip Kelly draws up for him.
Yeah.
So I would do a couple things. I would get exotic. I would try to confuse him. And I would do exactly what you said, bring the pressure. If you give Will not much time, and he's not really going to be looking to go long anyway, unless Chip says, hey, I think we got to look where we can take a shot here. Like, you could just tell that he does not look to go long. His deep ball is not good. So I would get pressure. I would maybe even play that again. I actually would do the opposite of CJ Stroud. I would guard that intermediate stuff, and I'd go
because he can't go over top, is what you're saying.
You can't go over top, yeah. And man to man, that deep stuff. Look, if you're one-on-one with Jeremiah Smith, give him a lot of cushion and make Emeka Egbuka beat you. And then lastly, what I would say, you got two great running backs, Quinshon Judkins, Trey Henderson. If you are Quinshon, if you see Quinshon in the backfield, I'd say our numbers across the board, we do not have to outman them. Quinshon is not a creator. He's a bulldozer. He's a good speed guy. If he gets second level, you're in trouble. He's kind of like Mullings. If Mullings is gone up there, he gets going and he's loose. But if you contain him, sometimes he looks pedestrian. So I would just, when Judkins in the game, man across the board, try to clog the lane, but don't put extra guys in the box. Now, if Trey is in the game, that is where you say, let's get some help down there, because Trey can actually create. You're not going to be able to load the box every time. I would only fear one of the two backs. I would not fear Will Howard. I would treat him like you didn't respect him, kind of, and make him prove you wrong. And I would let Mason Graham try to eat. Now, that's a kind of a boomer bust mentality, if that goes wrong and Chip Kelly figures out what you're doing and Will does see some things and takes it, and Jeremiah Smith, makes somebody look silly. But hey, it's house money here, right, James? At this point, it's house money.
For sure. And look, I'll say this, and I didn't really talk about this in my quick overview, is the one thing that I truly believe that has happened in those last three games is the running game, the lack of a running game for Ohio State ended up hurting them. And I could be right, I could be wrong here, but I do feel that Ryan Day, when Michigan's like, we're going to stop the run, we're going to make you pass, I kind of feel that the Michigan defensive coordinator, defensive approach those last three games kind of gave Ryan Day in the first half an over sense of confidence, right? It's like, oh my gosh, CJ is 22 of 25 for 189 yards at halftime. Holy shit, we're throwing all over these guys. Let's keep it going. We can't get any running. And I was just pulling up. I'm like, I don't think they even got 100 yards. Did get 100 yards last year, 107 for the team, but it was Travion 19 for 60 yards. Chip Trainum 6 for 37, and then Xavier Johnson 2 of 13, McCord -3, so 170 yards rushing last year. And you look back the prior two games, is that Stroud and McCord, even to a lesser
extent, there was no run game. There was no run game.
Good, Michigan was like, okay, we're going to stop the run, and then we're going to give you the passes. So I feel that there was a sense of confidence, like, oh my gosh, we're passing all over these guys. Let's keep it going, which if you look at my pregame shows the last 2 years at least, I feel like Day fell right into Michigan's trap in that regard. It's like, let's get him, make him think he could pass all over.
Why
us.
was it they had a trap set?
Do it. You keep doing it. Like if you guys run against Michigan, you're going to win the game. Go think back to 2019, right? When what's his name had like 300 yards rushing. J.K. Dobbins, et cetera. Think back to 2015. Think back to all these years. Ohio State runs the ball and they get the win. You force you stop the run as much as you can in the first half, and you give up those 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-yard passes. You look at the stat sheet, you're 18 and 22 at halftime for almost 200 yards. You're feeling good. We can pass all over these guys, but we don't realize is that Michigan's got it figured out in the red zone. You can't score a touchdown.
You got to run in the red zone. That's against anyone.
That's exactly what it is. So if Michigan can find that, which there's nobody in the defensive staff left, so it's got to be Sherrone Moore kind of pulling that mentality through onto the defensive staff. I'm hoping that Wink Martindale calls Mike McDonald at the Seahawks. I hope he calls Jesse Minter, who's now the best D coordinator in the NFL, at least like it seems like, against weak competition through 10 weeks, and just like make sure he has the game plan that's won those games the last 3 years.
Who else might he call?
Might call Connor Stallions. I mean,
there you go. There you go. You said he set a trap. I'm like, how is it? He knew a trap. How is it? He had a trap set. So James is willing to admit it. If Ohio State wins this game by any more than 2 points, that it was all Connor the last 3 years. Is that's accurate? No, speaking of which, James, before we get out of here, status of NCAA punishment, 90 days after the NOA should be November 25th. So it's coming up. It'd actually be 5 days before the game. I don't know. I haven't actually looked at the bylaws. I know Michigan gets to respond in 90 days, but then I don't know how long the NCAA gets to say to, oh, that was a pretty good response, or no, I don't like your response, or hey, we're going to do what we're going to do anyway.
So I saw an article like a month ago. It was like the timelines of these different schools. Tennessee a couple of years ago, a year or two ago, Miami from like 20 years ago, even like Baylor. And it does seem that these, response to the NOAs, et cetera, you can almost push it off for nearly eternity. So if that's still the case, which who the hell knows, I don't follow NCAA guidelines as much. It's like, okay, we can respond, but we can respond requesting more information or more time, or
I'd like a recess.
A recess, exactly. And so, like, I feel that if Michigan wanted to kick the can down the road for a long time, they could push this thing out for 18 to 24 months if they wanted to. We need to do our investigation, et cetera, et cetera. And the NCAA seems, from the timelines I've seen, to grant that without real much precedent or evidence needed. It's just like, okay, you're requesting this, cool. We're gonna push this back another 180 days or 90 days, or Michigan might even respond, but it's not good enough for the NCAA. So the NCAA re-responds, then Michigan gets another 120 days. So I don't think anything's gonna happen this season. Now there is some murmurs out there. Not saying they're factual, not saying that they're real, but I've heard it enough from people in and around that you might see, again, this is just murmurs. There's no basis. I'm not predicting this can happen, but you could get in a situation where if Ohio State were to beat Michigan by 56-10 or something like that, could Michigan use this whole thing as an out to Sherrone Moore's 5-year, $25 million contract? I don't know. But just the murmurs out there. So just,
do you think instead of an out, they would maybe their response would be to the NCAA, look, we have a confession, and the confession is Sherrone knew the whole time, and he hid it from Jim, and it was all Sherrone, and it was actually hit just throw him under the bus completely just to get rid of him. That would be quite comical, and it might actually be worth the sacrificial lamb. I don't think you make it past the summer because as far as the actual punishment getting dealt down, because if something comes deep enough where people get one-time transfers anyway, but if it's like a postseason ban at all, then you're going to have to let players go.
Right away,
yeah. So I don't think you'll get out of the summer. I was thinking to myself, if Michigan goes 6-6 and just takes a pounding in the Ohio State game and takes a pounding in a bowl game, does the NCAA go? What's the phrase in court? Time already served is part of the punishment. But then I was like, no, if anything, it'll just make it easier to punish a team because they're no longer a cash cow because they're in a bad program. James, I wish I know I saw your Nevada Buck and Spyro podcast earlier in the
Mhm.
season. You tried the whole card about, hey, we're a big time program. They're not gonna hammer us. James, I just have to bring you back to reality. You live in the same sad reality that I live in. You root for a Big Ten team. And the
Mhm.
NCAA would like nothing more than to prop the SEC right back to atop the mountaintop. They award you no points for being in the Big Ten. If Ohio State's going to get the hammer, they don't care about us, James. They don't care. You could win 10 titles in a row. They don't care about us. You know it's true.
I just don't see any way anything happens that takes past victories away or has any sort of suspension in the future. It could be loss of scholarships. It could be a fine. Whatever. I can't see a single way, because at the end of the day, I don't think, unless I've seen, there's nothing, unless evidence comes out that we don't know about, that proves that Stallions deliver this information to anybody, and that proves that he was actually at a game. Still don't believe that it's technically, it might be not the spirit of the rule, but that it's technically like illegal for people to send you tape and then you send them a Venmo transaction afterwards. I don't necessarily think so, but like this thing is so overblown. I mean, Spiro and then obviously Kirk and Buckeye Scoop, they just act like Michigan was like, so according to Ohio State fans, let's just say Nevada and Kirk, and then Spiro and anybody else between, according to them, maybe according to you too, that if Connor Stallions was still a member of Michigan staff, if nothing had happened last year,
right,
Michigan would be 10-0 right now, going number 3 in the country and going into the thing, because that was the only thing that mattered. We're forgetting that you lost 8 out of your 10, I guess 7 of your 10, coaches. You lost Jim Harbaugh. You lost 18 starters from last year. I mean, it reminds me of 2008 all over again. Is that team came back for a run. Obviously, didn't work out in 2007. They lost to App State. They went 8-4 in the regular season, but ended up beating Florida. And then the next year, you had one starter returning offense. You had 5 starters returning on defense in 2008. Rich Rod comes in. He's got Nick Sheridan, who's the OC to Alabama now, and Stephen 3 as your quarterbacks. It reminds me of the same thing. The reason Sherrone, though, doesn't get passed is because he was a part of the damn staff. He should have known when he had come back, and so he doesn't really get much of a sympathy like Rich Rod kind of did in 2008, but by 2009, middle of the season, you could tell it was not going to work with Rich Rod anyways.
No, so they're wrong if they think that's all that is, and I can even say that. Comment, by the way, Hammer, if you do think the hammer is going to drop. James, I got to tell you, I think that's the only thing that the way if nothing more, the language the NCAA has used talking about Michigan and what the Big Ten has said already, that they've said, quote, the Big Ten knows, or the NCAA knows and can prove the Stallions did these things. And they said some pretty awful things about Jim Harbaugh. Hurt my heart. Because as a Buckeye fan, no one's ever hurt Michigan like Jim Harbaugh has.
There's no chance that Harbaugh would have got that show cause, all that bullshit, if he was still the coach of Michigan. So it's just the defendant killed himself after the murder, so we're gonna give him 5 life sentences. Well, he's already dead. You can't kill him again.
Well, I'm telling you, if he was still there, they'd get him even bigger this time. They're out for him, and let me tell you this. No, it wasn't the only reason Michigan was good. They were good because they were rostered. They were good because Harbaugh, after 750,000 years, finally put together a defensive coaching staff. And, but to put on a second half clinic, unlike Prime Bama ever did, to put on beaten spreads like no one's business ever, yeah, that puts you over the top. Yeah, and you know what's coming. It puts you over the top a little bit. The only way we would ever know is if Harbaugh would have stayed and the staff stayed and Connor left and you had this in place. But guess what? But what we do know, because we did have Jim Harbaugh Connor Stallions.
The last 9 years.
Yeah, we had, and what happened when there was Jim Harbaugh and no Connor? What
games
happened?
Of the year after whatever it was a 6
But the roster was already built with ill-gotten gains. You think all those guys were coming back if they had been just playing straight up? If Uncle T's money didn't come into play? Are you Uncle T?
No comment. But yeah, I mean, maybe you're saying 2022 rosters will come back to 2023. Maybe could potentially make a
TCU.
Sure. I mean, that was bad. Now, don't. I know we're wrapping up here, but don't for
you
a
said
second,
so much, and I got to start taking my shots back.
Don't for a second think that TCU didn't steal some sort of Michigan signs. Joel Klatt said it himself. I heard a few weeks ago.
Joel Klatt is a simp. Joel Klatt simps for Michigan worse than you do, and it's your job to do it. I don't know why Joel does. You do it because you love him and you grew up a fan. I can give you a pass on that. Joel's out there defending Big Noon Kickoff today.
I saw the whole thread. I'm surprised Ohio State fans are so down Big Noon Kickoff. I think it was awesome. Getting half Michigan's games this last 3 years with Big Noon Kickoff. You knew about it. It felt kind of big, but I did feel that Michigan's games were always against the bigger teams, where Ohio State's just getting thrown in there against who fucking ever, right? It's not like
but the thing
Ohio State, and it's against Penn State, and it's against Michigan State, and it's against this team, that team. Whereas Ohio State's like, oh, we're going to throw you against Akron and Big Noon Kickoff.
But yeah, that's fine. But when it's Indiana, that's a top 10 matchup, and you got Penn State top 10.
I think that's fine. I don't know why you guys like. Who cares?
And it's all noon only. That sucks when all your big games are at noon. Now, I will say, part of the problem with Big Noon Kickoff is the fact that you play it at Ohio Stadium.
Ohio Stadium kind of sucks.
Atmospheres ever. So I will say Ohio Stadium owns more blame than Big Noon Kickoff does. Look, Fox says we pick the game we want, and that's our time slot. We can't do anything about that. The administration could make it to amp it up. We do it for Michigan games. We actually care for Michigan games. And those tickets are even more. Everybody tells me it's ticket prices. And I'm like, Michigan games aren't expensive? Michigan, Ohio State at the shoe, and Michigan at the shoe is not expensive. So, all right, James, you said a good piece.
Before we go, I was going to show you something really quick. I was going to turn the camera around one time in the office. This is something that Ohio State fans are just not going to see. You see that right there? Do you see what that is right there? You see, it's a little national championship pillow on the couch in my office. Oh, it's that little national championship game program and the booze that keeps me through this season. So that's what I'm looking at. I just turn around. Yeah, little helmet back there. Oh, got this
James,
championship all around.
If I had to give up, you see that? That's an empty Rose Bowl ring because I traded it for cash and tattoos. And if I had to vacate wins for getting power animals tattooed on me, then you're certainly good. James, they might come for everything. They might take your pillow. They're taking everything, even the pillow. NCAA, raid the office, Fort Worth, Texas. See you next time. We're going to do this next week. Goodbye. God bless. And go Bucks. And for you Michigan guys, give them a go blue, James.
Go blue.